The Young and the Restless. Spoilers, Monday, full the 30th of March 2026. There are moments when everything begins to fracture at once, when separate storylines that once seemed distant suddenly collide with a force that feels almost inevitable, and what is unfolding now feels exactly like that kind of convergence, where buried resentment, hidden addictions, and unresolved family wounds are no longer contained, but erupting all at once, pulling every character into a storm that none of them are truly prepared to face. And what makes it so gripping is not just the scale of the conflict, but the emotional truth beneath it. The quiet, dangerous belief that each of them is justified in their choices, even as those choices push them closer to irreversible damage. It's the other way around. Jill should be seeking Billy for reconciliation. She was horrible to him, selling to Victor, knowing how evil Victor has been to her son. I think that Billy should reconnect with Jill. I didn't know why Jill took the company from under him. She never even told him why. He never gave him a chance. Maybe a demotion, or make he and Lily co-CEOs. How would she have liked it if that were done to her? Not very likely. Billy stands at the center of one of these emotional fault lines, and the contradiction within him has never been more apparent, because on the surface, he appears calmer, more measured, almost like someone who has finally grown into the role he once struggled to inhabit, but beneath that exterior lies the same unresolved anger, the same stubborn refusal to confront the deeper truth about himself, and that truth is far more uncomfortable than anything he is willing to admit. Because it is not simply about Jill denying him control of the company, it is about the possibility that she might have been right, and that is something Billy cannot accept, not because it is untrue, but because it threatens the very foundation of how he sees himself. Everyone around him sees the danger of this unresolved resentment, and their attempts to guide him toward reconciliation are not just well-meaning but urgent, because they understand that time is not infinite, that there are moments when forgiveness must be chosen before the opportunity disappears forever, and yet Billy resists, not out of logic, but out of emotion, because in his mind, this is not a matter of business or competence. It is a matter of love. And if his mother truly loved him, she would have trusted him. She would have given him what he wanted, regardless of whether he was ready for it. And this belief, as flawed as it is, becomes the lens through which he interprets everything, turning what could have been a difficult but honest decision into a personal betrayal that he cannot let go of. From a narrative perspective, this is where Billy becomes both frustrating and deeply human, because his pain is real, but his refusal to process it in a constructive way traps him in a cycle that he cannot escape. And I find myself torn between understanding his emotional logic and recognizing the damage it is causing. Because while it is easy to criticize his immaturity, it is also clear that his anger is rooted in a deeper insecurity, a fear that he will never be enough. And rather than confronting that fear, he redirects it outward, transforming it into resentment toward Jill. And in doing so, he avoids the one thing that could actually set him free: accountability. I can't believe how boring Sally and Billy are. I had to finally FF because it went on and on while they were really just saying nothing. Like blah, blah, blah. At the same time, the situation in Las Vegas introduces a completely different kind of tension, one that is less about emotional wounds and more about hidden truths that are beginning to surface. And Adam's growing suspicion of Nick adds a layer of intrigue that feels both subtle and explosive, because Adam is not easily fooled, and his ability to recognize deception is one of his most defining traits. And when he begins to notice inconsistencies in Nick's behavior, it is not a passing concern. It is the beginning of a deeper realization that something is fundamentally wrong. Nick's insistence that he is no longer in pain, that he no longer relies on medication, begins to unravel under Adam's scrutiny. And what might have been convincing to others, to Sharon, to Noah, is not enough to deceive someone who understands the patterns of addiction as well as Adam does, because Adam himself has lived in that gray area between control and loss of control. And he knows how easy it is to mask dependency behind confidence, how simple it is to convince others that everything is fine while quietly slipping back into old habits. And this recognition create a tension that is both personal and dangerous, because Adam is not just observing Nick, he is confronting a reflection of something he knows all too well. The more Adam watches, the more the cracks in Nick's story become impossible to ignore. The subtle physical cues, the inconsistencies in his explanations, the way he deflects rather than addresses certain questions, and this slow unraveling builds a sense of unease that permeates every interaction between them, because trust once questioned cannot be easily restored, and Adam's suspicion begins to shift from concern to something closer to alarm. Because if Nick is not being honest about his condition, then every decision he is making in this high-stakes situation becomes potentially reckless, and that introduces a level of risk that extends far beyond his own well-being. What makes this dynamic particularly compelling is the contrast between how others perceive Nick and how Adam sees him. Because to Sharon and Noah, Nick represents stability, someone who has overcome his struggles and emerged stronger, and that perception creates a kind of blind spot, a willingness to believe in his recovery without questioning it too deeply. And while that belief is rooted in love and trust, it also makes them vulnerable, because it prevents them from seeing the warning signs that Adam is beginning to recognize. And this creates a tension that feels almost inevitable, because the truth cannot remain hidden indefinitely. And when it does come out, the impact will be far greater because of how long it was ignored. From my perspective, this is where the storyline becomes especially powerful, because it does not rely on sudden revelations, but on the gradual accumulation of doubt, the kind that builds quietly until it reaches a point where it can no longer be contained. And Adam's role in uncovering that truth feels both appropriate and ironic, because he is not traditionally seen as the moral center of the story, yet in this situation, he may be the only one willing to confront what others are avoiding. And that inversion adds a layer of complexity that elevates the narrative, forcing the audience to reconsider their assumptions about who can be trusted and who is truly in control. As these two storylines begin to intersect, Billy's emotional volatility and Nick's hidden instability create a broader sense of unpredictability that affects everyone around them, because both men are operating from places of unresolved conflict, and both are making decisions that are driven more by emotion than by logic. And that combination creates a situation where the potential for escalation is constant, where any misstep could trigger consequences that ripple outward, affecting not just them, but everyone connected to them. Billy is a spoiled brat and needs to grow up. He always have his hand out work and build your own company since you're the best. Oh, wait, no, you not the best at making something out of nothing. Grow up, Billy. Your mom gave you life and an education. The rest is up to you. So glad Nikki left Victor. It's about time. There is a sense that everything is building toward a moment where these hidden tensions can no longer remain beneath the surface, where Billy will be forced to confront the truth about his relationship with Jill, and Nick will be forced confront the reality of his condition, and Adam, caught in the middle, will have to decide whether to expose that truth or protect his brother from the fallout, and that decision, perhaps more than any other, will determine the direction of the story moving forward, because it will reveal not just what Adam is capable of, but what he is willing to sacrifice in order to protect or challenge the people he cares about. And perhaps that is what makes this entire arc so compelling, the realization that every character is standing at the edge of a choice that will define them, not in terms of success or failure, but in terms of who they are willing to become. And as the tension continues to build, it becomes clear that there are no easy answers, no simple resolutions, only consequences that will linger long after the immediate conflict has passed, shaping the future in ways that none of them can fully predict.